as an entrepreneur, we have some of the worst work ethic ever. Entrepreneurs either work way too much because they know the business is on their back, or they don't work enough because they don't have a boss to call them in. And so it's just finding that balance of knowing when to turn it off, because for many entrepreneurs, their cell phone is their office number. You're still getting calls from customers 9 o'clock at night.
Entrepreneurship really highlights for people their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
I think that's where you really learn the areas where you thrive and areas where you've just been coasting. If you don't have good boundaries, if you dedicate too much time to one thing and not enough time to another thing, if you don't communicate well, it really shines a spotlight on where you're vulnerable and where you really show up.
Hi, I'm Angela Abdul-Rashid, the host of the Prosper Connector podcast. We're the place where information is shared, connections are made, and great Birmingham stories are told by great Birmingham people. Today we have Tiffany Storey with Storey House Counseling and Doug Taylor of Rebirth Corporation and Rebirth Church.
Yes.
Dual roles.
Dual roles.
Thank y'all so much for being here. This is our podcast. Today we are talking about something that is super important to the community, important to me, entrepreneurship, but also the importance of mental health for entrepreneurs. Yeah. All right, so before we dive into that, I want to ask you a question. Okay. I love food. Food is everything. But if Birmingham were a food, what food would it be and why?
This is a tough question for me, but I'm going to go back to what I just said about mac and cheese. I think if Birmingham had to be a recipe, it would be mac and cheese. You know, mac and cheese is one of those things we have most of the time we have all the ingredients in our fridge pantry for mac and cheese. But everybody can make a good mac and cheese. It's really about how you layer the ingredients.
Okay.
And so I think Birmingham is much like that. We have all the components for a really awesome, innovative city. But it's just about whose hands are making the dish.
I love it. Okay. Doug, top that if you can.
Well, from dual roles, again, being a preacher, I'd have to say chicken. Several reasons. Chicken, I always say you never go wrong with chicken, and there's so many ways you can prepare it. I'm a fan of fried chicken, obviously. But the thing about that is there's so many different ways to prepare it. You can take chicken from Green Acres at the Hood. You can take it over to Ruth Chris. It's so diverse. I think that's one thing is about Birmingham. We're so diverse. We fit into so many different molds, and we're ever evolving. So I think we'd be chicken.
I love it. So macaroni and chicken. I would say soup. And when you think about soup, it's something that's comforting. It's something that, again, sort of to chicken, that it has something for everybody. It's something that's for every season, and that's how I see Birmingham. We really have something for everyone. There's a level of comfort in the city, and I'm getting somewhere with our topic, a level of comfort and familiarity and just nurture in this city that I've not seen in other cities that I've been in. And part of that is our entrepreneur ecosystem, which the two of you are staples in my humble opinion. But not just as entrepreneurs, you all tend to the business owner. So that's what we want to talk about. So tell me first your path to business ownership.
So for me, I would say the COVID-19 pandemic and the death of a friend. Kind of happened around the same time. I had a friend come visit me prior to, I want to say it was prior to the COVID pandemic. And my husband has been on me about starting my own private practice for years. And I just was like, that's not something I want to do. And my friend was visiting. She had gone through a lot of tough things in her marriage and with her children's father. And she was just on me about, sharing my gift to the world. And I'm like, I'm sharing my gift, but I'm doing it for somebody else's business. And she just thought that I had all of this awesome stuff to offer in the form of entrepreneurship. And I just was like, I'm not doing it. But then she passed away. And passed away after COVID, but during COVID, I had so many people calling me, watching my husband really try to pivot and just being stressed about, what he was going to do because he was a full-time entrepreneur. It just kind of pushed me in that direction. And so that was really my path to leaping out and being a full-time entrepreneur. However, my husband has owned his own business for years, and so I've always kind of been in the background because my undergraduate degree is business.
I love it.
What about you?
Mine's a little different. I've been an entrepreneur for 4 decades. My first entrepreneurial effort, I was 9 years old. I saw classmates that were great artists, and had other classmates that would write poems. And so I bought the poems and pictures from them, took them to church, sorry God, and I copied them on the church's copy, came back the next day, and I sold them to other students.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I love it.
I remember when I worked in high school, I worked at Arby's. And I attended Winona High School, and the teachers were frustrated with the same thing in the cafeteria. So I would put in orders at Arby's, get a discount, bring them back and sell them to the teachers.
So you are a seasoned businessman.
I love entrepreneurship.
Seasoned. So how then do you go from Storey House Counseling, which I know is such a value to the community, all the work that you do with Rebirth, obviously all the work that you have done since being younger, and then hone in specifically on mental health? Why? Why does that matter so much?
I'll let you start.
Well, for me, again, being a lifelong entrepreneur, during the COVID pandemic, similar to what you said, I saw so many entrepreneurs that were struggling and they didn't know how to pivot. So I hosted a couple of online Zooms talking to entrepreneurs about how they could pivot their business in this pandemic society. And so through the midst of that, talking to many of them about the challenges they're having because COVID was a stressor. Mm-hmm. Two of the greatest things that steal people's peace is isolation and lack of control. Yeah. And COVID did both of those things. And so I'm seeing all these entrepreneurs that are struggling to work and struggling to pivot with labor shortages and supply chain, problems, and they couldn't find a therapist. You could not find a mental health therapist during the pandemic to save your life. So because I had a circle of mental health professionals, I added that component to the coaching I was providing, and it just took legs.
I think for me, COVID was again a huge component because my husband was a full-time entrepreneur and I had a full-time job. And although it was somewhat stressful having to adjust the way that I operated within my role, I didn't have to stress about my paycheck. The way that my job was set up, it allowed me to be able to continue because I worked for a social service agency. And so we had two different responses. He was stressed, he is the primary breadwinner, even though he was a full-time entrepreneur. He made more money or brought more money in the home. But for me, I welcomed the break. So I started gardening. I was exercising. We was doing yoga. I started hiking for the first time in my life. We went out and bought bicycles. We were swimming. We were having paint nights with our kids. And what we realized is our family became much, much closer during that time. And as I would get calls from other people, once my husband started to realize there was like PPP and all of these different resources to kind of help with the business, and because he was an employee of his business, which was important, he could file for unemployment. So he was able to collect unemployment because his business was structured correctly. And so even though he had to figure out how to make sure the bills were paid, our home was taken care of because the business was structured properly, which allowed him to at least rest assured that, hey, I can at least make sure my family's bills are paid, right?
Absolutely.
And so for us, it was one of those things where it was like, well, how can we share this with other people? So I started doing Facebook videos. I was doing lives of me juicing. I was growing my own food. And so it allowed me to just be in a much better mental health space, whereas a lot of people like you said, their marriages were struggling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kids were struggling. People who weren't able to work like they needed to, who had single income homes, they were really struggling. And so it was just like, okay, well, how can I help other people find some sort of peace in the midst of something that's really uncontrollable, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where my business was birthed, and the vision, and not just single income families, but my husband being an entrepreneur, I started really catering to people who a lot of their income was wrapped up in their business. And so if they couldn't work, they could not pay bills.
Absolutely.
And so that became my clientele. It's like, okay, how can I help you not stroke out, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, and you're taking us somewhere, Tiffany. So, thinking about an entrepreneur and the stressors of taking the leap, which we preach entrepreneurship. Prosper particularly supports entrepreneurship, but that comes with some collateral damage if not managed correctly. Health, marriage,
Absolutely.
suicide rates, alcoholism, drug abuse, all of those things are tied to not having a level of balance to be able to handle the goodness of that business that the community depends on and be the human that's attached to making sure that it runs correctly. Tell us what you see, Pastor Taylor, Doug Taylor, dual role. You have worked with them. You've done the cohorts. What are you seeing in the entrepreneurial community as far as their deeply rooted needs for them as just human beings?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that is definitely needed is we say it all the time: work-life harmony. So one of our therapists mentioned that there's no such thing as work-life balance because work-life balance implies that every part of my life gets the same amount of attention. And she suggests that we find work-life harmony. How can I associate the required resources to every area of my life to make sure that I stay at a healthy, harmonious place?
I'm stealing that. Go ahead.
Entrepreneurs don't always get that because I think as an entrepreneur, we have some of the worst work ethic ever.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs either work way too much because they know the business is on their back, or they don't work enough because they don't have a boss to call them in. And so it's just finding that balance of knowing when to turn it off, because for many entrepreneurs, their cell phone is their office number. And so you're still getting calls from customers 9 o'clock at night. So without being able to set those boundaries and understand, really know when you're at your limit, at your breaking point, but not just knowing when you're at the breaking point, but having a viable outlet so that you can recharge. Because we work like there's a totally different level of pressure if you sign the front of the check and the back of the check.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And let's be honest. Our culture says that you're supposed to work.
Sure.
Work. It's okay to stay late. It's okay to come early. That looks good.
And we reward that.
Yeah.
We reward that poor behavior.
I want to take that a step further. I think beyond work-life harmony, I think entrepreneurship really highlights for people their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
I think that's where you really learn the areas where you thrive and areas where you've just been coasting. So like you said, if you don't have good boundaries, if you dedicate too much time to one thing and not enough time to another thing, if you don't communicate well, if you don't manage money well, it really shines a spotlight on where you're vulnerable and where you really show up. I also think, I agree with you that when you don't have a boss, then there's also this lack of accountability to hold you responsible or making you take accountability or ownership of the things that you're leaving lacking. And so I think one of the things that entrepreneurs need is some sort of accountability or support system with people they can trust, or at least some entity that can keep them on a straight and narrow path. And a lot of times a coach, which is different from a counselor, some sort of coach, whether it's a business coach or wellness coach or a licensed mental health clinician is a great place to start, because there's no judgment,
Right.
right?
Right.
Sure.
We don't have a dog in the fight,
Right.
right? So we get to show up without judgment or bias, but your needs are center stage.
Absolutely.
So what then would stop an entrepreneur from taking advantage of that?
Oh. The fallacy that because you're great in this area, you're great in every area.
So if you're good at running my favorite chicken restaurant, that must also mean that you're good at taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
You're good at carving out time for boundaries, communication.
Sure.
That's because the business is doing well. So you must be okay.
And entrepreneurs quantify themselves primarily in profits and revenues. Never quantify the other components of, as you said, communication, time management, because all entrepreneurs naturally study.
You said I heard you.
Okay, I'm trying. Thank you. I was letting myself off the hook. I need to see a therapist.
Come on
now 'cause
back.
you're
Here's a
giving me
therapist
trauma.
right here.
But no, we primarily look at the bottom line, the profit, and don't think about what kind of pressure is required
Wow.
to do that. And so I think it's important because, as you said, just having a coach to let you know that you're great in this area, but you're not great in everybody.
Right.
And one of the stressors that comes into play is especially moving from being employed to being an entrepreneur. You now have to develop a totally different set of skill sets.
Absolutely.
You know, you may be great at finishing the product, but you're not great at overseeing the business. So in that area, I've seen entrepreneurs spend time trying to learn accounting, get an accountant.
Get someone
So
who's
because it's much easier to manage what you're gifted to do.
Yeah.
When you operate outside of the gift, that's when stress comes, and that's when I need to call somebody else in.
I also think it's the illusion that I don't have the funds to prioritize that.
1,000%.
You know, it baffles me that I will see, especially women, we will spend money on our hair. We go drop $300 to get some braids. We'll drop $110, $15.
You're telling our business, Tiffany.
to get our nails and our toes done.
I don't have
We
that
got
problem.
the lashes. Really, we pay to get our makeup professionally done.
Sure.
And I tell somebody, if you pay to get your hair braided and you dropping $300, 2 sessions a month with me is less than that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
And so oftentimes we assume we can't afford something, but it's about prioritizing. No one's telling you to stop getting your hair done altogether, for the next 6 months. No, maybe for the next 90 days, you're in crisis. Just say, you know what? I'm going to do this over this.
Right.
I'm going to ask a friend to braid my hair, or I'm not going to get my hair done, or I'm going to, scale back on, how often I'm going out to eat so that I can prioritize my mental health. And I really push that because as an entrepreneur, your business relies on your mind.
Right.
Sure.
It relies on your creativity. It relies on your ingenuity, right? And so if you neglect the very place that all of that is birthed
Right.
from,
Absolutely.
your business is going to suffer,
Yes.
right? And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs convince themselves because they have so much stress and pressure behind making sure they're making ends meet. If they employ other people as a small business, you tend to get really close to the people that work for you, especially if those people have been with you for a while. So you feel this sense of responsibility for their family's finances. And so we will begin to neglect things or move things to the bottom of our priority list so that we can make sure financially that we are moving the needle forward. But a lot of times our physical and mental health suffers.
You're leaving yourself behind.
Yes.
Can I interject something?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
I think there is, you can't eliminate pressure, stress that comes along with life. Specifically, as we're talking about mental health and being able to balance and stay healthy in the entrepreneurial space, one thing I've seen for so long, and the importance of having a coach is I've seen entrepreneurs give themselves unnecessary stress because they left the security of a job too quickly
Yes.
to go into.
Okay, come on.
They left the security of a job so that they could be a full-time entrepreneur. Like the badge is full-time entrepreneurship. The badge is not full-time entrepreneurship. The badge is paying your bills,
Right.
being happy,
Right.
not kicking your dog, not pushing over the fish tank,
Yeah.
And your wife not leaving.
and
you.
your wife not leaving.
Yes.
You. And so I've coached entrepreneurs, and quite honestly told some of them, Why are you rushing to get away from this insurance? You know, this, as you said, this consistent paycheck. And really, I teach entrepreneurs, take the resources from your regular job to invest in your business and strengthen the baby. So when you walk out, feed the baby now so the baby can feed you later.
Yeah.
But that's a matter of perspective, right? And so I think that's where mental health comes in.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I really think if you're going to make that transition, people assume that you come to counseling when you're in a place of distress. That's actually the worst time to come to counseling.
Absolutely.
The best time to actually start your mental health journey is when you anticipate that you want to change and that you're in a place where you have some level of clarity.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I agree with you. One of the things that I did for myself personally is I worked my business and I worked in my job, and I put money aside and I planned and budgeted for how much I needed to pay myself, how much the business was going to need to have, how much did I need to save up so that I had a few months of working capital in the bank to make that transition. And then I started applying for grants and different things like that, right? And so I think, like Pastor Doug said, it's really, really important not to move too fast. And your business will dictate when it's time to move.
Yes.
For me, my business competed with my full-time job. I started to have to turn away clients. And I already had so much money saved aside. I was already able in a place where I could pay myself a little bit before I even left my job. And so it didn't make sense anymore. It's like I would make more money. The 5 clients I just turned away would have made more money than I would make on my job. So it just didn't make sense anymore. And I think that's when there's a good time to transition, is when you can no longer balance having the job and the business, and actually turning away the business costs you more money than staying in your job.
And I think, and this will sort of get us to our last question, I think the key to what both of you are saying is that it takes community. There has to be an open willingness to hear from a coach, to hear from a counselor, not just when things are not good, but also along the good path as well. So what are you all doing to help? I know. Let's let the people know. What are you doing with Rebirth? What are you doing with Storey House Counseling for entrepreneurs, for people who are on, again, not just in the bad seasons or the seasons that are not as good, but maybe even in the reaping and the flourishing seasons, and need a community to walk with them along those paths. So talk about what you're doing with cohorts. Talk about what you offer with your business and how people can get connected.
So what we do at Rebirth Community Corporation is an 8-week cohort we call Reboot. I used to work in information services, and I understood that if you didn't, when a computer would become bogged down, if you didn't reboot it intentionally, it would crash.
I love it.
It would cost you files. It would cost you time. It would damage the computer. But if you would stop and pause and intentionally reboot, you can preserve your files, preserve the hardware. And so we started teaching entrepreneurs how to reboot intentionally, how to start over. And so through that, we do the traditional information like pricing strategies, marketing, branding, headshots, website, accounting. But we also incorporate the mental health and emotional wellness component so that we can help along the way. Yes, you're learning how to set up QuickBooks. We're also letting you know you need to quit. How do you manage stress, breathing exercises? And so I think it's important just to, as you say, have that community, especially, and realizing that even as you progress at different levels, you're always starting over.
Absolutely, yes.
You know, and I just believe that everything in life we learn either by mistake or by mentor. And God uses mistakes to teach people who are too proud to submit to a mentor. Find a group, find a mentor, and avoid mistakes.
I love it.
So for me, it's a little different. I have these different niche or pockets of entrepreneurs or leaders that I work with. I was doing counseling over coffee, which was a open group. I kind of paused that because finding the right time for entrepreneurs was a challenge. And I was investing a little bit more resources than was necessary because of people not always being able to commit. So one of the ways I do that now is I'm a seed provider. So I've partnered with another therapist I've worked with over the years, and she thrives in some different areas that I don't thrive in. And so we've collaborated to create a course where clinicians who are going into supervision or starting their own practice, they can actually come, get CE credits, and take a course on how to establish their practice, how to onboard clients and other clinicians, how to make sure they're accounting for quality in their business. I'm also a DISC facilitator, so I will go inside of organizations and work with them on different things that threaten productivity and lead to high turnover. And then just my individual counseling. I have a lot of clients that come in and I work with them on one-on-one. But one thing I also believe in is not always being paid for my time. So I have been very intentional about joining different community networks. I'm in a book club. Recently, this past weekend, I went hiking with a group of women just to facilitate a therapeutic conversation. I participate in a group started by a local realtor, Alicia Webster. I think it's Coffee and Conversations. And so anytime she asks for something, I'll go and I'll attend and I share whatever I can. And so I believe in being really intentional because I feel like this is my purpose of not just always going to opportunities where I'm getting paid, but paying it forward, right?
Absolutely.
Planting those seeds and then watching those seeds take root and being able to reap the benefit both in my business and in my community.
I love it.
All right, so give me 3 words of wisdom for entrepreneurs that are watching.
One thing I will say is self-care is not selfish. It is
Say
necessary.
that one more time.
Self-care is not selfish.
I love it.
It is necessary. We're always going to be evolving. Anything that's not growing is dead. I can't take ownership for that statement. I got that out of a good book. But it resonated with me. Anything that's not growing is dead, right? And so we should always be working towards growing and evolving. And you have to actually nurture yourself.
Yes.
Right? And nurturing yourself is self-care, whether that's spiritually, physically, emotionally, but it is necessary. And if you are wanting to be an entrepreneur and if you are wanting your business to be successful, it is necessary that you care for yourself. So self-care is not selfish is my 3 words of wisdom. It's a statement.
I love it. It's perfect. Pastor Doug?
3 words, 3 phrases.
Whatever you want to give us.
Okay, thank you. First, I would say don't feel guilty for taking a break. Number 2, all money is not good money.
Say that, Pastor.
Number 3, never stop learning.
I love it.
Yep.
I love it. Tiffany, Pastor Doug, thank you all so much for joining us today on the Prosper Connected podcast. I know that our community is better because you all are in it, but I know our community will be even better after they hear the words that you have shared with us today. So thank you.
Thank you for
so much for joining us.
It was
Thank
awesome.
you.